So, nice. Thanks for, waiting with us, staying with us all this time. Welcome to the September 20th iteration of the Amsterdam Ruby community event. Nice to have you all here. And here is actually BetterUp offices in Amsterdam. And we have Kareem, who's going to say something about BetterUp.
Thank you. Well, I'm asked to keep it super short, so I stay high level. Maybe any follow-ups or questions, let's connect during the break. Welcome to the office, welcome to BetterUp. Just a quick introduction of BetterUp. BetterUp has been there for almost 8 years, mainly on the US side. We're almost 700 plus employees, I think now almost 800 even, with 100 plus on the R&D side. And basically we have more than 500 companies in our portfolio. So this is just some statistics of BetterUp from a very high level. We also Series C funding with almost $550 million. What do? We deliver precision development at scale. We are building what we call human transformation journey. That means we focus on what we call the whole person. So we try to understand the whole person when it comes to like both professional and also personal. Try to support the human being, the individual, going through their journey and their challenges and help them transform and get better at it. These are our portfolios we have today. These are the companies that we support and work with. These are our partners. And one of our biggest product and main product offering is coaching sessions. So what we call digital coaching. We actually are the ones who introduce digital coaching. And these are we now are working on, our coverage is 770 countries with almost 65 languages. So from a very high level, we have mainly 3 products, Lead, Care, and Connect. As you can see, these cover multiple domains, but they cover the whole person as an individual. So it's not just professionally, it's also on the personal side. And then we have a platform that supports. Quickly going through what this Lead product does. As you can see, digital coaching, mainly introduced for leaders at the beginning or executives, and then we expanded the pool after that. Care is more on the well-being side, supporting individuals to be in the right mental state, to be able to maneuver their way during the day-to-day challenges. And then a quick example on platform, what we call platform is integrating into workspace. So there's a lot of tools that we use every day, integrating with these tools to understand more about the changes individuals experience every day in their professional life. Just a quick insight about the EU org. We just launched the EU org almost 8 months ago. This is a new org. We actually acquired Impraise. This used to be Impraise office, and BetterUp acquired Impraise. And we are launching now the R&D org in Amsterdam in this office. And currently we have 3 teams which focus mainly on the platform side, whether it's video experience or identity as a domain. We're also building foundation capabilities to help us distribute and scale our systems. This is a quick glimpse about BetterUp. We are very famous to this called Better You, Better All, BetterUp. This is our belief, this is our mission. And side note, we're also hiring if you're interested. Last thing, and this is very special to be Amsterdam, we are offering a free coaching session to everyone here. There is a QR code you'll find printed around that you can use to actually experience a coaching session for free on our D2C product. That's it.
Nice.
Thank you.
Not going to be...
3 minutes? I don't know.
I'll just pretend I kept count on the minutes, okay? So, it's nice for everyone who is here that they, not only are in this office, but also have food and drinks. But does this also extend to the people on the live stream if they reach out to us, let's say, this week?
Arno? Yeah, definitely.
I've just heard that this also applies to you later this week. So, I'll get into how you can join us later. Let's switch some cables. So, we have some presentations. Thank you. Right.
The mic? No. Will I need the mic for
Eventually the black screen is going to become something. Don't worry. Are you receiving anything over there?
Nope.
Nope.
Isn't technology marvelous?
Yes, technology isn't marvelous. So this is usually where we resolve to proper engineers. Here we have Tom. By the way, this is a fantastic moment to introduce the rest of the team. You just saw Tom running by to Rayta, who's sitting there, who's just going to click through the slides I'm going to talk about. At home, we definitely have Floor. No, it's not this thing. Don't worry, it's not this thing.
Oh, okay. So
It's us. It's not
right.
you. So at home we have Floor. Hello, Floor. Well, she just posted a picture that made me think, I think it's better if you work indeed from home. Because she looked like she has a flu and things with COVID still, everyone is a bit like, are you sneezing? So, yeah, welcome Floor. Nice to have you here. I'm definitely Arno. I read a lot to my kids and that's why they said, Arno, can you also host a meetup? And I said, yes. So, this is me. And I'm running out of things to talk about. We'll probably show you pictures later on. Oh, look, we have a background now. That's fun. Yeah, there's something pink going on over there.
Yeah, it's a little slow.
Yes. So you may have noticed when you went to Amsterdam.rb that you could join our Slack, and that we now have a new URL to join our Slack. You probably didn't notice because that is a very minor detail hidden behind some click. Anyway, oh look, that's us. I wasn't lying. It's so good. So we have we have the same Slack, which now only has, because of reasons only valuable to product managers at Slack, a history of 30 days, which sucks. But you can still sign up going through this new amazing product link thingy. It used to be a JavaScript app that would sign you up for Slack. Now it's written in Ruby. Thank you, Tom, for building that thing. So sign up for Slack. Definitely, if you want to, if you want to start your coaching journey with a free coaching session on BetterUp, or better yet, send this thing to your boss if he's micromanaging you. Did I say that out loud? Yes, I did. Anyway, so we have a code of conduct. Trick question. Did anyone already observe behavior that was not in our code of conduct? As in things that were, yeah? Do you know how you should address something that is going wrong? Or even what is considered inappropriate? Well, I have this straight from our website. Behavior considered inappropriate in a professional setting. Sounds a bit vague, but if you think, yes, that's it, come talk to us. Or address it yourself, but if you feel unable to do so, come talk to us. So we have a code of conduct. Everyone here, including me, including speakers, including the guest, including everyone on our Slack, is going to abide to those terms. Yay! Then we have an event. Look, probably already on a live stream, we have Jared White. Hello, Jared. Yes. You can't see him, but I just saw him. Anyway, he's going to have a chat about server-side rendering in a static site generator. Wasn't the whole idea of a static site generator that you didn't need a backend? Anyway, so that's going to be fun. And then later we have someone from BetterUp who's going to tell us a bit about engineering and how working in at least 2 continents without messing up the flow for the users of your system or the colleagues in the company.
Without the use of what? Sorry, can you repeat the last part?
Are you going to talk about how you're not going to ruin the show for the users of your system or your colleagues in general?
Both.
Okay, so nice. That's going to be fun. I think, yeah, this is a bit early because I want to show it to you now. But after this, we'll go straight into Ahmed's talk. So have a last drink, make sure you have a full glass of water because you have another 2 minutes. We're always looking for speakers. And I could be looking at you now, or you think I am looking at you now, but I'm definitely looking at you all. Yeah? So, the thing is, we have a meetup coming up in a month, again, with 2 speakers. They are already confirmed, so don't worry. Then we have a few other tricks, and then Christmas is going to happen, because it's already the season of best wishes. But February 2023, we're going to have another meetup that's going to be filled with talks. And we're looking for speakers, and we definitely want to, listen to you. So, if you have a wonderful idea but you need some speaker coaching, if you have a very polished talk but no place to deliver it, come talk to us. Yeah, we want to hear you. That's it, I think. And we go now to, Jared's presentation.
Jared's
right?
first, yeah.
So, that means that he's probably able to unmute. Yes. Hello,
You want
Jared.
me to share my screen?
Well, unless you want to do this thing just with us looking at you. No, please share your screen. Sorry, I'm going to find you again.
All right.
People in the room are waving to you, but
Hello, Jared.
yay! He doesn't see us.
Oh.
But we have you to relay it.
Yes, so people are waving, and he said that he will be looking at the live stream, and I said that will be 1 minute late, so you're going to confuse the hell out of yourself. Anyway, Jared, there was something that I wanted to say about you. Yeah. Let's have a chat over about this thing. Give me, why is my page so slow? So, Jared, for Jared, it's 10-ish a.m. now. For us, it's 7 p.m. So for him, it's just, did you have your breakfast yet?
Just a little bit.
Just, okay, good. So he's going to talk a bit about how life is as a web developer building your own frameworks. But fun thing is, he is into Celtic music, and he is having a, double career, both as a musician and a web developer. So, Jared, with this, I think you can just take it away. This is where you will
All
pause.
right. Thank you very much. Yeah. Hello from across the pond. And this image you can see behind the slide is a photo I literally took of a fairly well-known bridge here in Portland. It's pretty scenic. So yeah, the Bridgetown project is actually named after Portland because one of the nicknames of Portland is Bridgetown. Anyway, so here we are from dynamic to static and back again. So a quick rundown of what we'll talk about. A little bit of an introduction on myself and where I come from on this. What is Bridgetown specifically, and then we'll go into what I call a hybrid architecture where we have static rendering and server-side rendering, and then we'll talk about how one might deploy a repository that has both of these approaches working together, and then a bit of a demo of how that looks in practice. And hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end for some Q&A. So a little bit more about myself. I'm Jared White. I'm the founder and lead Rubyist at White Fusion, which is a boutique web studio based in Portland. I've been a Rails developer since 2008, so quite a while working with Ruby stuff. And in addition to Rails, I started working with Jekyll, which is also a Ruby-based project, and doing stuff with that. And of course, Bridgetown, collectively since 2015. And generally as a web developer and working in web design and all that sort of thing, well, let's just say it's been a while. So yeah, keep on trucking here, and I'm still very excited about all this stuff, so that's good. I actually have a website which is fairly new called the Spicy Web, where I post blog posts and videos about specifically front end usually, and what people call vanilla, vanilla CSS, vanilla JS, things like that. And there's a Discord community there, and lots of fun stuff going on there. So so that's sort of a thing that isn't directly tied to Ruby per se, but some of those topics may be of interest to people in general. All right, so Bridgetown. What is Bridgetown? Well, Bridgetown is a next-generation progressive site generator and full-stack framework powered by Ruby. Bit of a mouthful there, so I'll try to break that down just a bit. Many of you perhaps have heard of static sites at this point, or static site generators. But what do I mean when I say progressive site generator? Well, on the front end, we've had this term for a long time called progressive enhancement. It's this idea that, you want to start with most widely compatible, things like HTML and CSS that's, easy to load and works in all browsers, and, try to stay away from really complex or intricate things like, JavaScript bundles that are only going to work in certain browsers or are going to be slow to download on networks. And I'm sure we as Rubyists are familiar with a lot of problems that can come with, having these very elaborate systems that kind of make the front end turn into spaghetti. So, so we have this term called progressive enhancement. I'm trying to apply that idea sort of to the back end and have a mindset there where we're progressively generating HTML, and that kind of happens at the infrastructure level. So ideally, you'd want to start with really simple tools, try to generate static HTML that's easy to deploy, generally free to deploy these days, which is awesome. And then as you need it, slowly introduce, more complex infrastructure, dynamic routing, other components like databases, et cetera. Like only do that where and when that's necessary. So a little bit of a timeline here. This is condensing decades into one slide, but in the early days of the web, things kind of were just static by default. You write some HTML files, stick them in a web folder, and there you go. But obviously, like that did not scale. So we got server-side templates of various sorts. Hello, PHP. Yes, I was very much into PHP back in the day. Then we added databases and content management systems and all this different stuff. And it seemed really cool for a while. And then we started to realize that deploying all this stuff and maintaining good performance and keeping everything secure and also it not costing an arm and a leg started becoming a nightmare. I worked for a while with WordPress and trying to get WordPress sites up for people, and yikes. But anyway, thankfully, this thing came along that got called a static site generator. And there were sort of attempts at the different times, but I think, we kind of had to wait for just raw file and CPU speed to catch up to the point where, unless it's a really, really big site, you could generate a whole site in like a few seconds. And then that's where we are now, where, most websites you can generate super fast, which is great. And there's one static site generator in particular that I kind of think of as the granddaddy of modern static site generators, and that's Jekyll. I fell in love with Jekyll. I totally fell when I discovered it around 2015. I thought it was amazing. Of course, Jekyll is Ruby based. So, once I kind of realized what you could do with Jekyll theoretically, I got very, very excited. Obviously powered by Ruby. I was already doing some work with Liquid in other contexts, so I was familiar with Liquid, and I thought being able to use Liquid templates was really nice. Jekyll was just built for this one thing, generate a website. It was kind of easy to learn in this very self-contained world, all based on Git, of course, because GitHub invented Jekyll. So it's like, wow, I can just like stick some content in my repo and push it up to GitHub and things build. And now I have a website. This is so cool. Being able to use things like Markdown and just all this neat stuff. Of course, there was the issue of how does like a normal human edit content now? You can't just hand someone a Git repo and say, here you go. So I had to figure out ways to come up with some kind of CMS-like system that could essentially load and save files under the hood and generate live previews and that sort of thing. And there's so many different ways to do that now, but originally I was essentially just writing a Rails app. So I'd have a Jekyll site here, and the Rails app over there, and somebody could log into the Rails app and edit some content. But as far as the public was concerned, that doesn't exist. They're just going to a website that was built by Jekyll. But, a couple of years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, but definitely a couple of years ago, it just started seeming like Jekyll was not the thing anymore. And so many people on tour are talking about lots of different tools. 11T is a popular static site generator written in JavaScript. And it's actually pretty nice. I like 11T a lot. But I'd see things like this. 11T replaces Jekyll. I'd be like, really? Is this true? And you'd see other things like, Jekyll uses Ruby and Ruby is weird and dependency hell. And I never really liked using Jekyll and I'm so glad to use this other thing. And Ruby is slow and this, imagine all the things you hear about, the problems of Rails supposedly and Ruby and all that, and like multiply that. And that's what I was hearing all the time about Jekyll. It was a little demoralizing, I have to say. Unfortunately, the Jekyll project really wasn't doing much to dispel all those viewpoints and rumors, because as soon as Parker Moore left in mid-2019 as a maintainer, I feel like the project kind of just went into maintenance mode. And there's like public quotes to that effect, and I won't get into some of the drama there, but essentially Jekyll is in maintenance mode. So it's fine. Like some people think, we should have that in open source of like, this project is done and that's great. Like it works, it does what it claims it does. Maybe a bug fix here and there, a little improvement, but that's fine. And for some people, that's fine. Like some people just want to keep using Jekyll. That's perfectly all right. But I felt like Jekyll was not keeping up the pace of, matching other ecosystems to develop their experience with other static site generators and other frameworks. It just didn't feel modern anymore. Something needed to happen. So right at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, a lot of extra free time on my hands, I had this crazy, this great idea. And that was, holy mother forking shirt balls, just fork it, fork Jekyll. So amazingly, I actually tried it and it worked. And out came Bridgetown. So at this point, as some time has passed and a lot of work's been done by both me and some other contributors, most of Bridgetown, I would say, is essentially a rewrite. But I always want to point people to, hey, like some of the things that you see in Bridgetown that you really like this is completely inspired by Jekyll. Maybe a bit of code lurking in there is from Jekyll, so credit where credit is due. But admittedly, a lot has changed. We have features, so many features. Static site generator is like one feature. We have all these other features that are kind of added on top of that in various ways, which I don't have time to get into, but when you go to the Bridgetown website, it kind of lays it out for you. So for today's talk, let's talk about this idea of a hybrid architecture. And I love this GIF. It's just so funny to me. Let's talk hybrid architecture. So, this idea of SSG or static site generation, you build something once for deployment. That's usually because of a Git commit or maybe a CMS will trigger a build, and then that's it. Like that's the state of your website. It's cached forever. It's just HTML files deployed somewhere and nothing changes. That's it until, of course, you rebuild it. Server-side rendering is different, of course, and we're all familiar with that because that's what Rails does. For every request, the framework's going to dynamically build and serve HTML, which obviously requires a web server. And you can introduce caching strategies, but that's on top of your framework, right? You have server-side rendering, and then you got to think about how you cache stuff. You have to do something extra to build caching into the infrastructure. So static site generator, cool for some things. Obviously, you can't use it for something that has to change regularly based on, user feedback and interaction. Like you can't log into a static site and be like logged in because there's nothing to log into. There's no server, right? Yes, of course, there's a server that's like serving static HTML files, but there's no dynamic server. So the question becomes, how do you deploy a site that's both static and dynamic? Because for most sites, you're going to want something static maybe your home page, some marketing pages, blog posts, a whole bunch of things like that. But then you're going to want to start introducing forms, and maybe somebody wants to be able to log into something, and maybe you want some content behind a paywall, which requires being able to log in. You want to be able to handle payments, and there's like a whole bunch of things you can start thinking of you need to add on top of your static site. And then the question becomes, how do you do that? If you're using something that's purely a static site generator like Jekyll, there's no answer to that, right? It literally is what I did in the past, which is build a Rails app over here, build a Jekyll site over there, and manually wire the two together somehow with like API calls and stuff. The nice thing about static sites is we have fast, cheap, generally free global CDNs now, so we can deploy our static sites to a CDN, and everything's great. But for SSR, it kind of goes back to more old school ideas of you got to find a hosting platform, and hopefully it's Ruby friendly. And in the past, that might have been Heroku, but nowadays, not so keen on Heroku. There's better options, I feel like, especially for this hybrid architecture I'm talking about. What we really want to be able to do is deploy everything at once in one place and get SSR, SSG together. Is this possible? Yes. Render, not the only solution in town, but my favorite solution. I think Render is really, really, really cool because they've kind of built this idea from the get-go that people are going to have all sorts of different architectures of all sorts of different hybrid sort of approaches, and you can set that all up. They give you the tools to do that. They give you what's called a blueprint specification, which is really just a YAML file. So you write this render.yaml file, and it can describe both a static site and a web server together in one deployment. Set up this blueprint, and then what you can do essentially is punch some holes through the CDN of the static site to point to the dynamic routes. So, you have your public-facing site, it's a static site, and then certain routes like will go to the dynamic server. The dynamic server has its own URL, it's its own, thing that's running, but the public doesn't need to know about it. All they know is your public site, and any URLs on your public site that need to be dynamic, it's punching a hole through that and going to the server. We can do PR previews through Render, which is awesome. And if you really need to start adding other pieces like PostgreSQL, Redis, all the sort of server-side infrastructure that we think of needing as Rubyists, it's all available there. And there's plenty of people using Render purely for serving Rails apps. So, it can handle all of that. All right, so let's take a look at a little bit of how this actually works under the hood. I'm going to keep diving into code very minimal because I want to be able to do this in fairly reasonable time. But to show you what I'm talking about, here's my own website. This is a PR preview that's under construction, so the public one's not quite this fancy. But first of all, we have a very simple thing here. We have a contact form, so we can come in here, we can put in an email address and type in whatever. And then there's this bot check, which says what is 3 plus 10 minus 2, and if we put in nonsense. Yep. Well, I clicked over to another tab. Maybe the screen share stopped working.
Well, if you go back to the previous slide, we know.
Is it still showing demo time?
Yeah.
That's so weird. Let me try something.
So that's cool.
Represent.
Yeah.
I'll stop sharing screen for one moment and then try it again.
Yeah. All right.
Yes.
All right, can you see anything?
We see a form now. Fantastic. Sorry for ruining the flow.
Chat it up.
Oh, no worries. Thanks for pointing that out. Yes, all I had done so far was just pull up a PR preview for my White Fusion website. And when you click a button to pull up this window to just send a message, you can put in your email address and a message, and then I have this little bot check field, and obviously if I put in nonsense and don't answer the question, it nulls that out. It shows red. It says oops, try again. What is 3 + 10 - 2, etc. So this is a static site, and the window that comes up is still a static site. It's just some JavaScript to make this window pop up. But the bot check, of course, is the server doing something. So we can take a look under the hood to see how that works in just a moment. Also show you a thing that is under construction here to book a session. And when you click book session, you get this very simple little form where you can pick a morning session or just a 1-hour session, and look at some available openings. And if you don't pick one and you try to check out without picking one, it says please select a suitable time for your session. And then if you actually pick one, then it will have an error. Okay, well, on my local computer, that kicked me over to Stripe. That didn't work here, so I must have set something up wrong. But yeah, that would just pop you over to Stripe checkout, and I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with Stripe. So yeah, let's take a look at how some of that's working under the hood here with Bridgetown. Can you see my code editor? Is that coming through? Awesome. All right, so here's a repository, all the Bridgetown website code here. Starting with a lot of the static content, it's really just Markdown. You have this little bit at the top that's called front matter. That's all, old school Jekyll stuff here. Some front matter at the top, some Markdown, and Bridgetown just does that as well. If we come over to a page like the advanced page, which is where you can book something, there's not really much here on this page. It's essentially calling out to this thing called advanced booking, and this is what's called a Ruby component.
It looks again like we're only looking at the front matter.
Okay.
We're having so much fun with Google Meet.
Seems like the screen sharing is not working so well at the moment.
I think you're very positive about this.
Hopefully some of my earlier slides came through. Try this one more time. All right. Can you see my screen now?
Looks like it.
Okay. So we have an advanced booking component that's being rendered out. And this is very similar to the View component project from GitHub, if anyone's familiar with that. A lot of Rails folks are finding a lot of benefit from that. So the idea is that you can kind of split your view layer of your website or your application up into lots of different discrete components, and they have their own set of variables and their own template, and can render out a little bit more self-contained worlds than if you just use partials for everything. For the advanced booking component here, it essentially loads in some data of if there's any dates that have been blocked off on the calendar. Otherwise, it will generate some recurrence rules using a really cool gem called Ice Cube. So it will, go through some different times on, say, like Tuesdays at different times or Fridays and different things like that, and generate occurrence rules. And then the template for that will set up the form and put all those different times into some drop downs and things like that. Now, this is all still static. This isn't a dynamic thing. This gets built statically. So, anytime I want to put in a date that's like, okay, this date's blocked off now. I don't want this to be available for someone to book. I would just update that data, which is just in a little YAML file here. Very simple. I can just put in some dates, say these are blocked off, and then rebuild the site statically, and there you go. So that part doesn't need to be dynamic, even though it feels kind of like, oh, maybe that's like dynamic data stuff. But no, that's okay to be static. But obviously, the form has to submit to somewhere. So the form is submitting to a dynamic route. So if we look at the form here, it's submitting to /book-session. /book-session.
Again,
Sorry.
So it is 2022, right? We can have static site generators and so we have SSR and SSG working in one project, but Google still has, well, it's called it spans down on online meetings. Can you please reshare your screen? I have no clue what's going on.
I think it's like the full
It's a real bummer.
whenever it puts full screen, I think it crashes it. That's like
Are you still getting my video? Is it just screen sharing stuff?
Yeah, the video looks fantastic. It's just a screen share. So we already heard probably he's not on Chrome, and you're doing things in full screen, which I don't know if this is the real culprit. But if you're going to switch your browser now, that means we're going to have some silence on our live stream and event. So that's not going to be very helpful. So is it okay if I just keep on nagging?
Keep on what?
Nagging.
Oh, sure, that's fine. Yeah, there's honestly not too much to show, so I can get like a couple more files to go through, and then that'll be it. So
Sure.
we'll do our best.
Let's do that.
So we have a form that goes to /book-session. Now, if we look at our render.yaml file, this is what tells render what to deploy. So, we have a site, the environment is static, it runs Bridgetown's deploy command, and that puts static files in the output folder. Great, we have a static site that gets deployed. Okay. But then in addition, we have this little section here where this is where we punch the holes through the CDN. So we have a /contact-form, and we have a /book-session. And anything additional we want to have on the URLs, it's fine. Like everything under those sort of top level URLs gets punched through to this other site that gets deployed. And that gets defined here as another web service, and the environment is just Ruby. It's just like a Ruby web service, and that has both a build command and a start command. And the start command essentially spins up Bridgetown's dev server, only now it's a production server. It's using Puma under the hood, and it uses Rayta as a sort of web toolkit that Bridgetown integrates with. And I wish I had time to go into how cool all of that is, but that would be a whole different talk. So just suffice it to say, we get to use Puma and Rayta to kind of power all of this stuff. So we have our static site, we have our web service, we've punched the holes through. And then in the same code base, if we look here at _routes, we have these routes. We have our contact form, and we have our book session. And we'll just take a quick look at this to round things out. So when we try to book a section, it looks at things like the parameters, and if nothing's been selected, then it's going to actually use Turbo. Yes, that Turbo, Hotwire Turbo, to send a little Turbo Stream update to a tag that's basically the oops tag with a paragraph saying, please select a suitable time for your session. So that's the same thing that we saw over here. If we're on this page and we just try to check out without selecting something, we get, please select a suitable time for your session. So this is a static page with a dynamic Turbo Stream response. I hope you can understand how sort of like galaxy brain, like, whoa, like how can this be possible? Like kind of an interesting thing to have happen. So yeah, basically, from there, it's, checking different parameters. It's setting up a payload for Stripe and, puts that all together. And assuming everything's good, there's another turbo stream update that happens instead of the error condition. This is now the success condition. And it will say, that's awesome, loading Stripe checkout and redirect to Stripe checkout. Now this route doesn't have an extra portion at the bottom that's just like, template content, but Bridgetown has a feature where these dynamic routes can actually render out template content. So you could have like a full page, and the page actually is coming from a dynamic route. It's not just a static page, but I don't have an example of that here. I do kind of use it in a slightly hacky way, but kind of cool way for the contact form. So for the contact form, it will essentially render the template to get text content and HTML content for an email to be sent out. And the way that works is the template content is really just some markdown. And markdown is text. So technically we can use the markdown as the text variant of the email. So that's what we do. We render this purely as text, and that goes into the variable text message. But then we also render it again with an emails layout, and the emails layout converts the markdown to HTML and puts some styles in and everything, and that goes into the HTML variable. And then down here we just deliver a mail message with the text part, the text message. The HTML part is our HTML message, and then we use the turbo stream update to update the contact form to basically say, thanks for submitting your message. So I know that was a lot, that covered a lot of ground, but yeah, I hope it gives you kind of an idea of the things that are possible. And some of this even is in the works right now for the next release of Bridgetown, which is Bridgetown 1.2, hoping to get a beta out in a few weeks where it'll kind of, fully kickstart this idea that you can have a static site, server rendering, use turbo streams to update things on a page when a form submits, and all of that cool stuff. So to wrap up, Ruby, you still got it. We can still be in the game here, building modern websites that do cool stuff and have an interesting developer experience story. And we don't have to kind of wave our hands and go, I don't know what to do. Let's just go use Gatsby or 11t or something else that's JavaScript. No, we can still do some cool stuff here in Ruby land. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, if you're interested in learning more about Bridgetown, go to Bridgetown.rb.com. If you run into any issues, please file issues. If you fix things, become a contributor. This is all open source, so hopefully we can work together to make this even better. Yeah.
Yeah. They're cheering and applauding. I might be overdoing it a bit. Anyway, so I have a few questions. So on the website, I saw that this thing is optimized for web developer happiness. That is clearly you. You are the web developer. You're also the maintainer of this thing. But what kind of input did you get that you thought, so the big problem with Jekyll is this and this and this, and this is how I'm going to solve this to ensure that the web developer is happy? What are the things that you did for it?
I'm sorry to say, as soon as you moved the mic, I can't hear you.
Yes, I'm working off mic, my bad. So the question is, what is the difference between the approach of Bridgetown.rb and Jekyll? So that Jekyll is some relic of the past, and this thing is built for developer happiness. What do you do differently in the community to ensure that this keeps being, well, optimized for web developer happiness?
Yeah, so it's been a little bit of a process to get to here and the things I showed you, because, like I mentioned before, when I was building Jekyll sites, I was also building Rails applications a lot of the time. And the Rails applications could handle some things like submitting forms and providing dynamic data through an API and so forth. And then Jekyll was, kind of just the static content engine. But there was always such a mismatch. Like, you'd work on maybe a separate repo, right? Not even a mono repo. You work like on a Rails app that's in a repo here, and you'd work on a Jekyll site that's in a repo there. And the two worlds don't really know about each other at all. And you start to think, well, why am I even using Jekyll? Like I could use any static site generator written in any language. Like it doesn't even have to be Ruby, because there's no connection between the static site and the dynamic server. And you instead look at some frameworks now, like, Next.js is a very popular one, where it's one framework, one code base, but you have static routes, you have dynamic routes, and you also have like serverless functions to handle authentication or sending emails or whatever. And all of the stuff works together. It's all one code base. It's all basically one framework. And the dream for me has always been, how do we get back to this one framework idea for Rubyists? And someone might say, well, just build the Rails app, right? Why can't Rails run the blog? Why can't Rails run the static pages, do everything in Rails? But I feel like the developer experience of Rails for content, I'm doing air quotes here, the Rails developer experience for content is not great. That's my personal opinion, but I just don't think there's a story there. Like Rails is built for like applications with databases and users logging in and like data tables and SaaS stuff. Like that's its sweet spot, and it's awesome at that. I would never want to replace that or say like that it's not fit for that. But there's this other world of like, hey, this is like a website with mostly static content, but now I want to add authentication, and now I want to add handling forms, and now I want to add some e-commerce, and I want to like add all this stuff on top of that. What's the answer to that? And I'm hoping Bridgetown is becoming the answer to that.
So I see some people in the audience here nodding. You can't see them, so I just relay. That also means probably people from the audience have some questions, and I'm going to relay the questions to Jared as well. So, any questions from you? I have more, but no one wants to listen to me. Yes, Jan.
Maybe I missed it because sometimes the feed cut out, but the Bridgetown, does it also parse then the web request to a Ruby object so that you can handle the web request more easily in the web components?
Did you hear that question? No.
Can you repeat it?
So the question is Bridgetown parsing the web request in such a way that
it becomes a Ruby object.
That it becomes a Ruby object that you can either pass on to the backend or just use from that static site thingy?
So the format of a request, so if there's like a static page that matches the requests, like if you're running the developer server and, you go to a URL, like if that static page has been built, you get the static page. And when you deploy and you have a CDN, like the CDN knows all the routes that are available because they're just all the static HTML routes. But then for a dynamic route, Bridgetown, intercepts that, knows it's a dynamic route. And I mentioned Rayta. So the actual like routing layer is handled by Rayta. And Rayta is actually a pretty cool project in and of itself. I recommend people check it out. It's sort of a competitor to Sinatra, you could say, but some people really push Rayta even into Rails territory, so it's pretty powerful. But anyway, Bridgetown essentially uses Rayta for all of its routing, and it figures out, which dynamic routes have been created, and then, it will serve those directly as, as any Ruby framework might serve it.
So the person asking the question, Jan, is nodding, so this makes complete sense to him. Are there other questions from the audience? So, I have one, but I'm not the audience. So what kind of contribution is Bridgetown looking for? Because probably, we're at BetterUp, they're hiring. Probably you're also looking for contributions. What kind of contributions are you looking for? There's a bunch of ways to get started contributing to Bridgetown. Filing bug reports may seem, like, so what, or maybe even annoying for the maintainers, but no, it's great. Like, I love bug reports. I want to know which things are breaking so we can try to fix it. If you're fortunate enough to be able to
do a little bit more investigation and get an idea of how to fix it, maybe you can file an issue and also file a PR that fixes the issue, which is awesome. And we get those. And it's sometimes like, I don't even know, like something will break in the test suite and I'll only start to realize like, oh no, our test suite broke. And then I see one has the fix in the PR and I'm like, great, merge. So I love it when that happens. We have a Discord chat room that's pretty lively. So, if you're into Discord, you can join our Discord chat and offer suggestions or share things you're working on. And then finally, I do have a GitHub sponsors link that, if people feel like Bridgetown has been really helpful for them and they want to support open source, they can sponsor me on GitHub.
Okay, that makes sense. Another question from Tom is, so it seems to tie a lot of things together, Bridgetown. How did you like that as a software engineer to work on such a project that makes just everything work?
I mean, it's great, but I'll say just in general, like working on open source anything ends up with even a small audience and people appreciating that. Like there's nothing like it. And relative to the amount of time spent working in the web industry, like I'm pretty new to open source, which I feel like is a shame. I wish I could go back to a past self and say, set aside the time and the effort to become an open source contributor. It is so cool. But now that I feel like I'm finally doing it, it's so rewarding. And I think especially for junior developers, like there's no way I know of to get farther faster than to find a good open source project and become a contributor or even create your own project. It's just so great.
Good. Nice. So, one more question. So you speak at Ruby events. Oh, we have a question in the audience. Yes, sorry, Wes.
You mentioned starting off with Jekyll. How easy is it to switch from Jekyll to Bridgetown?
So the question is, you mentioned starting with Jekyll first. How easy is it for, let's say, Amsterdam Ruby community organizers having a Jekyll site to transform this thing into Bridgetown?
So oddly enough, for quite a while, we didn't have a good migration guide to say, like, here's how you could move over from Jekyll. And people kept asking, hey, like, I should be able to move over from Jekyll, right? We were like, yeah, but you kind of have to change a few things and it's a little bit different. And so it's hard to like list out the differences, but there's a page now on the documentation that's literally migrating from Jekyll. And hopefully that can get you started. And we hope to keep adding to that and making it even more informative as time goes by.
Nice. That's solving my problem, but it's also solving Wes's problem. So thank you for that. So we made a few mistakes with the live stream today. I'm sorry to everyone in the room on the stream, but preparing this discussion with Jared, I had a look on the website and the documentation is awesomeness. So if you think that you need to see some things that you didn't see in the live stream, go to the website and look at the docs because they are a thing of marvel. So you talk at Ruby events. What else do you do to keep the community interested in Bridgetown?
As I mentioned, we have a lively Discord. I'm hoping to put some actual videos out soon. As I mentioned, I'm doing stuff with Spicy Web, which includes videos, but I also want to do some very Bridgetown specific content. And then the last thing, which I'd love to mention, is there's going to be an online Bridgetown Conf. So just like an online, a few hours sort of mega meetup to share some presentations on Bridgetown and bring the community together. So that's happening in November. I believe it's November 7th. Again, Discord or on Twitter, we'll get up the news on there very soon.
So then just one more question. Will you stay? I mean, please open the live stream after this because we have more talks, because it would be very nice to just have you around for the rest of the event. But I think it is time for a small break for everyone. So
all right. Sounds
I hope
good.
that you
Thanks, everybody.
Please stay around on the live stream and join our Slack if you want to. Thanks for the talk.
Yeah.
And that clearly also means that we're going to go off stream for a few seconds, 20-ish minutes, 10 minutes. I'm looking at organizers. 10 minutes?
10, 15.
10, 15 minutes. So grab yourself a drink, and we'll see each other at 8:15 if you live in Amsterdam.
We have some actual products that has gamification, so like.
Nice.
But yes, far away from gaming.
So we're going to continue with the second talk of this evening. I don't have any slides to show regarding other things that we're interested in as a community, but I can tell you this. Looking at the well-fed peeps around here and knowing that there's also dessert, consider chatting with your employer about sponsoring Amsterdam Ruby meetup events. Yeah? Because we're always looking for sponsors. That's fun because that means we can pay for our bills, but also that we can keep you all well fed. So if that's your thing, and if you happen to work in a company that's hiring, I mean, almost no companies are hiring, I know, but if you're working for a company that's hiring, feel free to just ask if Amsterdam Ruby meetup can join. That would be fun. Anyway, so second talk of this evening is going to be by Ahmed, who is a staff engineer at BetterUp. And well, I think most important is just that we give the stage to you. Ahmed, go for it.
Thank you. So welcome everyone. I'm Ahmad, a staff engineer here at BetterUp. I'm the past 4 years. And 9 months ago, I joined BetterUp, and shortly after I joined, I started working on most of the time about the engineering challenges. But
1 second.
go ahead.
I filed up the audio settings again.
I told you.
Yeah, here we go.
And you said don't worry about it. Okay. So to give you a quick overview of today's agenda, like first I will give you a bit of context on how BetterUp platform works. We'll go through some of the core functionality, core products that we have at BetterUp, and explain to you some of the main personas experiences. And then I will tell you our story for the past 7 months expanding BetterUp product to Europe, sharing some learnings that I hope that you find useful and you can apply for your projects. Then at the end, I want to also make sure, of course, we have time for a Q&A session. So, what is BetterUp? BetterUp is a personal and professional development platform, and we have a wide range of products that extends from enterprise level offerings to individuals as well. So, but one of our main products is one-on-one coaching, and that's what I'm going to focus on throughout this talk, just to keep things simple. And the first main persona that I want to focus on here for this product is the coach. Well, how the coach experience would look like. So coaches are actually partners, and from the moment that they decide to partner with BetterUp, we ask them to we collect from them BII information, their names, emails, as well as their addresses and so on. And we ask also about preferences, stuff like language preferences or time zone preferences. Next, we ask them about their qualifications and coaching certifications because we want to ensure that our coaches pool are set for success, as well as they can provide the best value possible for our customers. So once the verification process finishes, we ask them first to set up their availability inside the product, and that then they will be staffable and can be seen by the coaches. Which on the other end of this relationship lands coaches, where we collect pretty much the same BII information, But adding to that, like once you fill in your profile and your preferences, we present you with an assessment that we call whole person assessment, which is a science-backed assessment that BetterUp created to learn more about you as an individual. What's your ambitions? What's your goals in life? You can expect also questions about situational questions that we would conclude from it your strengths area and potential areas for improvement later in the product, that we can personalize your experience and provide you the best personalized experience for you and provide you with what we need and what you want. Once we collect all of this information, we basically pass it through a machine learning model that will start ranking our coach pool and find the best coaches that can help you throughout your learning journey while using the platform. So, as you can imagine, we collect so much sensitive data, BII and health data and more data to personalize our products for you. So that levels up the privacy and security standards for us at BetterUp. So that all of our data storages are encrypted at rest and in transit, as well as our system is GDPR compliant. However, the question is, why should we care about GDPR if we are already a US-based company and we have a US-based deployment? That's actually, by the way, it's on Heroku. So I'll come to that in a second. It's not working. Yeah. So the reason that in fact, we already have EA customers and customers from around the globe that are operating on the US deployment already. And I tried to simplify the current system architecture as much as possible. So all of our persona, including both the coachee and coach, would have a single entry point that would land on a Rails application, Rails monolith application, that does all of the magic for us. And based on your role your role as a system, will identify if you should access the coach dashboard or the member dashboard, or even if you are a different persona like administration, we also have administration dashboard that's all powered from the same Rails monolith. And our application is hosted on Heroku, and it has, as many other Rails applications, has so many downstream dependencies, dependencies that generate and consume data from our monoliths that I will talk more in depth in a few seconds about it. So as you can see, like the experience is pretty straightforward, just single entry point. You land on a monolith, it figures out, does all of the magic for you, and you are set for success. Then, and more importantly, we have a centralized storage, like a single database, single source of truth for all of the data we collect, so it's easier to manage and to operate. Then what's the problem? Like, we already have EA customers on the US deployment, and like any new customer, we're just onboarded there. But if you're like me, when I started in this project, I didn't know about data sovereignty, and I still mispronounce it actually. So that's the real problem and the real challenge for us. What does it mean is basically that an enterprise would request or require you to store their data in the region that they belong to. So for example, an EA enterprise, they want their data to be stored in Europe. Can't be stored anywhere else around the globe. So we started thinking, okay, with a single cluster that's deployed in Heroku, how can we actually solve this problem? And then it sounds like to satisfy the customer demand about like data sovereignty, we need a full isolation. So we need to have like a completely new cluster and have both monoliths, one deployed in US, another deployed in EU. And we can't share any data outside of EU, and we can't share any data outside of US, and can't store it actually outside. So, and then what about the experience parity? This simple experience for coaches is not longer true, right? If we don't extract the coach domain outside of the monolith and build a centralized coach dashboard and deploy it across clusters so that it can aggregate, and both monoliths as well can consume data from the coaches, it won't be possible to have like experience parity for coaches. Similar for authentication. Once you go distributed, you need a centralized place to authenticate all of these surfaces, right? You don't want to duplicate your authentication logic everywhere. So, what are the challenges? Sounds like straightforward, and we want to do what we know what to do, right? So the challenges here is like this is a massive project. If you think about the timeline, how long this would take is like, if you think, for example, about the coach extraction, it's like pretty standard Rails application, right? It's like you can expect its models to be coupled, very tangled, and there is no separation between the internal domains of it. So it's a huge migration just to know what to the boundaries of the coach domain. That would take a lot of time, right? And what about resources? How many resources do we need, as well as what kind of resources? A project like that, it extends from SREs to architects, engineers, and even beyond the engineering department. You need to loop in your sales team and coach operations, because you are changing actually the experience for coaches a bit here, right? And even more important, what is the risk? Oh, that's the risk.
Yeah.
Oops, we're back. So, and it's even more important to ask, like, what is the risk of this migration? Like, we already have a healthy business running in US, so we need to make like progressive, how can I say, progressive steps toward this North Star. So how can we de-risk? The next question is like, how can we de-risk this design and start unblocking sales, as well as unblocking, heading toward our North Star. So back to the customer demand. It seems like it's pretty straightforward, right? It's like they want full data isolation. And the first challenge is like, okay, infrastructure. As I mentioned, like our infrastructure is deployed in Heroku. Heroku is great and has served us very well for the past years. However, and even though they provide instances here in Europe, it doesn't guarantee data sovereignty, which is a whole completely different requirement for providers, right? So we started thinking, okay, we need to then spin the same monolith application in Europe, and data sovereignty, if you think of it, is like not an EA specific requirement. Any customer around the globe can have the same requirement at some point. So how can we also make sure that we organize ourselves to win, and anytime we want to expand to new continents or regions, we don't repeat the work that we are doing. So we invested in our infrastructure as a code, and we choose AWS to host our services in Europe, right? So what about dependencies? The dependencies that I mentioned earlier is like they're all US based, basically for latency, and the company started in US, so everything naturally we choose it to be in US, right? And for this, I will just dive deeper, like into the dependencies first, where when we started this project, it's like most of the people at the team were new to the company, and the company has grown really, really fast over the past few years, that every squad had their own personas and their customers that they're trying to serve, and they are starting new products and so. So rather than building and investing in like in-house tools, we were always looking first for an external provider that can help us ease the development efforts and let us focus on what matters. So we ended up having so many dependencies that we don't even know what they are and like what kind of data they need and like how they are connected even to the app, right? So we started from building a catalog for these services, listing them down, telemetry services, data warehouse, third-party integrations, and started building a process like this to go over each of these dependencies and decide what we are going to do with it. So if it's stateless, that's perfect. It's the best thing ever, right? The drop a single instance in between the clusters and they can just use it. And if you want to horizontally scale it, that will be also easy. If not, then you think, we think about like anonymization. Can we redact PII from there? Does this system need PII and sensitive data to be stored there? If yes, then we scrap PII, and we even introduced internal tools to help us throughout this migration that other squads around the company now using it to scrap their models, right? So if not, some system can't function without this data so that it personalizes the experience for members, right? So we ask if we question basically the third party capability of providing a second instance in Europe that can, if it's gonna store data, it will just store it in Europe. So, and we kept actually, if that's the case, sorry, then we will just do that. And we kept replacing a dependency as a last resort. And the reason for that is like replacing a dependency is not easy. Like take an Heroku movement to AWS. This is kind of a dependency. It's a huge project, right? So that's just one example. And then what is the cost of training your people about this new provider, and what is the cost of or how you would make sure that it has a feature parity, even though like this is the first time in some cases, the first time to see this dependency. So you really need to understand what it does, how you integrate with, and how it's beneficial to the product to make a decision about. So that's why we kept replacing any dependency as the last resort, as long as it fulfills the customer demand around data sovereignty, then it's good, it's perfect for us. But then there is a big player in this challenge, which we haven't talked about in depth yet. Can we? Yes. Then the coach, how we would maintain a feature parity for coach. And similarly for other, I want you to think about other shared personas across clusters, people that need access to both clusters to operate and to deliver on their job, right? So starting about the coach, the first thing we started, like, since we have now isolated clusters, what would be the experience for the coach? Now we have 2 entry points. They can have a dashboard in US, another dashboard in EU. What about their availability? They will have to create completely new accounts as if we are just importing them today, right? So, and even worse, what about like an EA, a member or a coachee in the EA region books an appointment with a coach? So we have to send this appointment to the other island as well, so we avoid conflicting appointments, right? And we have also aggregated reports, Coach Insights dashboard, which we present them with insights and metrics to track their performance and how they are, what's their impact about the customers, right? So that was like a no way for us. Like definitely coaches will say this is unbearable experience, and that was our assumption. So we started thinking, it was like, okay, what about like interviewing coaches and asking them about their demands? What do they think about this experience? So, and the feedback was quite amazing and surprising for us, because they agreed that on long term this is a hard experience to maintain, that we'll keep logging in here, there, managing 2 separate accounts, and so. However, in short term, it's quite acceptable, but they also gave us feedback about the things that we need to improve so that we can have a successful release, right? So that feedback actually was very helpful for us to prioritize the work that we need to do to have an MVP or like an initial release that we can roll out to enterprises, where we generate feedback and start reiterating toward our North Star. And great thing, since we were talking about dependencies, is that third parties actually sometimes are quite helpful and can save you a lot of time. So for the problem I mentioned about appointment syncs, we already had calendar integration for coaches, so that we sync their private calendars with BetterUp calendar. So if there is any private event happens outside of BetterUp, we don't want them to get booked at the same time. So we manage this automatically. So we decided basically to use the same integration. So we sync both clusters through a third-party integration for the calendar. I guess I talk so fast, right? Okay, so as I said, like the feedback for coaches was really great for us to let us focus on what would make a difference for both internal and external experiences and help us head toward our North Star. So the focus for the couple next 2 quarters will be actually consolidating back or unifying back the coach experience. And now we started defining the coach domain and the boundaries around it. We even built tooling to visualize the data, our data model using Neo4j database. And that's basically our new challenge for the coming quarters. Yeah. So, few learnings like that I really would love to share with you. First is don't assume, just ask. If we kept our assumption about the coaches won't like this experience and they won't accept it, we would have been still working on this project, and we wouldn't have been able to release an MVP that or like an exact replica of like the one-on-one coaching experience in US. Here we still offer it in EU. So don't assume, just ask. Make sure you loop in your stakeholders, understand the requirements and their needs, because that could be surprising for you. And second is like work as a team, not the problem. The right team makes all of the difference. If you're an engineering leader, make sure that you have a diverse team. A big project like that needs people that have a knowledge about the current system, how it functions. It will save you a ton of time. And also need people that are visionary, that can look and prospect into the future, so that you maintain a good balance between what you need to do today and how this would grow to what you want to go for the future. And third thing, so throughout our journey, we created few internal tools that would help us with coach enrollment and the other island. And it's basically a replication API that is both atomic and idempotent. As usual, like the production data can always surprise you. So we had problems with like while we are migrating this data. If that API wasn't atomic and idempotent, we wouldn't be able to ensure the data integrity in the EU, and basically you will have to drop the database and start over again, and we didn't really want to do that, especially that we started importing members to the new cluster, right? One tool as well that really helped us is doing pre-mortems with cross-functional teams. As I said, we were a new team. We don't have a ton of knowledge about the BetterUp ecosystem and the platform. So pre-mortems helped really us to look into, prospect into the future and understand the consequences, the consequences of our actions or our decisions on and how it would cascade to other squads and other teams like coach ops, as I mentioned earlier. Like we are changing the experience. They were the key player in the connection between engineering, product, and our partners who are the coaches. And last thing, that's very important for me at least, which is really embrace growth. Like a project that this huge, at the beginning we just thought like we can't go anywhere else other than the North Star. We have a ton of operational costs we have to pay, but with good plans and like understanding again your stakeholders, you can make all the difference that you can. You might think that you can't. So it's fine to do mistakes along the way, reflect on these mistakes, get learnings, and make it the fuel for the future. So and reiterate. Yeah, that's it. Thank you, and please questions.
Definitely there are questions. Yes, I see people with questions in their eyes.
Yeah, so I work with geographical replication and disaster recovery, so I'm really interested to your replication strategy there?
Okay, so for like the current solution or the future iterations of coach centralization?
Whatever's in your mind. Like.
Okay, so let's start with the future, because like what we have as of today is like, as I said, like it was just one-time replication. We collect coach data that we need to enroll a coach, and we just move it one time. And that we have done on the application layer, because it's very business logic driven. Like we need to be selective about which data we choose and so. But in the future, when we centralize the coach, we are now actually investigating and doing some work around deciding the database technology. We are not planning to maintain any replication manually, and that we have tried it for some time, and like replication and synchronization, and that was horrible idea. And so we are exploring with Aurora, global instance, global Aurora, that can out of the box help us with the replication needs that we would need. But yeah, we're still in the investigation phase, and I haven't read the full RFC yet. So I should.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good.
Jan, you had a question?
Yeah, one of the most interesting things that I found of the presentation is that the coach is apparently not bound to the data sovereignty, while you have coaches in both the EU economic area and the US.
Yeah, coaches are not bound to the data sovereignty because that's covered through legal terms. Like they are partners with us. So basically, we take consents and handle that legally. But actually, one of the requirements that I remember that we discussed at some point is that not all coaches would have access to all clusters because of that, basically. So, and that's still to be investigated and to understand exactly what we're going to do. The first batch of coaches, we are sure that there's no problem about their data replication, but from legal point of view, it's perfect. From future point of view, we want to make sure as well, like the right coaches has the right access to the right cluster.
And then one of the other things that I was wondering, since you have a US instance and a European instance, you obviously also have the time zone. Did you also explore the idea where you said, no, the coaches are just bound to a certain region because of the time zone difference, they are inherently already bound to region?
So I will repeat the question to make sure I understand. The question is, does time zones make a difference on who has access to which cluster?
Yeah, so the idea is that I can imagine that US coaches also have a lot of US coachees, and EU coaches have a lot of EU coachees.
So there is no EU coaches and US coaches. It's one pool that has access to both, but it's limited pool at the moment.
Yeah, but, so what I meant is that some are based in the EU and some are based
Yeah, definitely. Some are based in EU and some are based in US, and some are based also in other countries around the globe. But again, like because they are partners and we have legal terms with them, so their data it's much easier to manage because of that. But that doesn't mean that we are sacrificing any security or data privacy for coaches. So their data is still stored secure along with the members in each cluster.
Now, yeah, what I meant more was whether you explored the idea to say that if a coach is based in the EU, that he only gets access to the EU members?
That's very early in the project, yes. So we thought that was actually the assumption that we made. Another assumption we made: EU coaches can coach EU members, and no US coaches can coach US members. But that wasn't correct assumption.
Yeah, East Coast is fine. It's mostly West Coast that is a problem because time difference is so great, but you know, like you get eventually you have problems with FedRAMP.
I get it. I get it. I'm talking from one point of view, and you're talking from just the time zones thing. Yeah, we were selective about the first group of coaches. Yeah, since we collect their time zones, as Olaf was just mentioning. So we were like so to ensure that we have enough capacity in the EU, we just to choose the coaches that have overlap with the EU time zones. Sorry, I didn't get the question. Sorry.
I think adding to the operations side, it's also a perk of like work that we provide for coaches, right? Like with the distributed environment we have today and the remote environment, coaches have the flexibility to work anywhere. We have a lot of coaches in South America serving EU, right? And they choose their own schedule. Think of it as a freelancer. You would define your own schedule based on your day schedule, and you just have the flexibility to work whenever you want.
Yeah,
So that's a strong.
Yeah. Then I get why you kept the single pool and not split it up.
And
Yeah.
also a big part of it is also sharing, like sharing knowledge across sites. We want to lock knowledge in like US and EU and have two different like experiences on BetterUp. We think a big part of BetterUp is being global and helping everyone everywhere, right? We look at the individuals, so it doesn't matter where you are, you get the right support you need. So that's why we from day one we are definitely a remote first company, but also when it comes to our coaches, we give them this value of like working anywhere, anytime.
I can imagine for the coaches it's also very useful being able to schedule sessions in the evening and having a coach available no matter where on the planet they are if they just want to work at that moment.
Interesting.
Yeah. We definitely encourage like coaches to schedule like their coaching time during working hours, but like this is at least what we do with our like BetterUp employees, right? We ask them don't schedule extra time after working hours to just have a coaching session. But some people prefer that. They want to finish the day work, and then have a coaching session in the evening, which might be perfect for a coach on the other side, maybe in the US or Australia or whatever.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
So just that I have this straight. So the data sovereignty is about EU data not leaving the European Economic Area,
Yes.
right? But does that also mean that the US data cannot leave the US? Or could we potentially maybe even completely store that in the EU and everything is golden?
So yes, but
I have no clue.
yes, so that's possible, but the same because it's a customer demand. Like your US enterprises as well might demand the same the same data sovereignty requirements, but the other side of it is like we don't want to add risk to the business that's running in US, right?
Yeah.
So, and we're still experimenting with AWS and our infrastructure as a code. So from the get-go, if we move the whole US cluster to AWS, that will be a huge risk on the current running business.
Yeah. Okay, good.
And adding just a quick point to that, closing what Ahmed said, I think it's also we set a very high bar when it comes to data privacy and security.
Yeah.
And it's even on the US side, regulations are changing. Today, EU is definitely a couple of steps ahead. The US, like California, for example, is already discussing data sovereignty regulations. We also work with the Fed government, which is also another level of security, right? So what we said is basically a very high bar for ourselves, and we're trying to aim for that.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm a bit interested in the authorization part of the scheme.
In the what? Sorry?
The authorization part.
Authorization.
I think there is a central service that authorizes people to get in, right? Is that only for coaches because they are distributed, or is for everyone?
So yeah, we haven't started building on that. However, that in our future plans to have like centralized authentication for all of our systems for both US and EU and as well as coaches, in addition to any other dashboard or any other domain service that we would introduce. So that works for all personas as centralized. It's more like Amazon style of things. You log into whatever Amazon.de or Amazon.Egypt, for example, and then you go to the same authentication service, you get authenticated and smartly get redirected back to the clusters that you belong to. So it's quite similar.
But is only for coaches or also for coaches?
For all. And for coaches, regardless whether they belong to EU or US, all.
Yeah. And is that something that you are planning to develop yourself, or you are planning to consume a pre-existing service? Because I think there are some, right?
So yeah, there are many great providers for authentications like Okta, Auth0, and all of these services. We are planning to use some, but still, like there is another side of the thing is like how you would manage your accounts and the identity of these accounts. We still want to host this data and have like the control over the data, not an external provider, like similar to the dependencies slide or the challenge that I was talking about. So yes, we can offload the capability, but the data still we prefer to own it.
Another
Go ahead.
Sorry. Another thing that you mentioned around the dependencies, I think you're talking about SaaS services that you use as part of providing your business. Do you have like an estimation of how many and how complex this is, and whether they can be things that you can self-host or bring in-house? I imagine, for example, dealing with money is something you don't want to do, but rest maybe.
So just to start from the self-host, like there's definitely few, like Sentry, for example, that we didn't have like an option to spin a Sentry instance in Europe other than just hosting it. But that's also an infrastructure headache, and our infrastructure team was totally focused on bringing the EU cluster. In terms of, and the better solution we found was like, let's scrub the data. Like these kind of systems must not have this PII information anyway. So that's the better route to follow. For in terms of numbers, I don't know exact numbers, to be honest. It was, maybe someone, Peter, do you know how exactly? But there were so many.
50 to 100.
It was, no, it's about 60, 50, around this number. So along your data warehouses, Snowflake, Looker, Braze, stuff, SMS services, Twilio, and so many other providers. And some other, so other departments as well were using CRM tools and Workday integration, Slack, all of this stuff, that generates data and moves data inside.
Right. Now, I have one more question, which can potentially be answered with a yes/no situation. So we were looking at an MVP, right? You talked about North Star, iterating, talking more even than potentially building. Will you let the community know when you've reached that North Star?
So I think that was actually like that was our first release. It's fully functioning, and then feature parity was the US offering for the one-on-one coaching product. And for the North Star about centralizing the coach, this is for the coming next 2 quarters, and we are currently working toward delivering on it.
Okay. I think we're quite interested to know where this is going. So
to be continued. If you're interested, guys, like in a couple months.
You're on our Slack, right?
And I don't think so.
I'm going to ask it again. No, I'm not going to ask it again. Anyway, so for everyone here, feel free to just keep asking questions. But I want to end the official part of this evening in 2 minutes, because I want to tell you that the next meeting is going to be the 18th of October. We have 2 confirmed speakers, and it would be, fantastic to see you all, and potentially even more of you all. Doei!
Thank you. Unless you're planning to give it to me, I can take it with me to actually still work.
I want to know for sure that you heard